Hi everyone! In this video we'll talk about exotic tomatoes, varieties that not only have a good taste, but also look exciting. About those tomatoes that make the color palette of our harvest more diverse and bright, and therefore certainly deserve attention. And today I've prepared for you a review of such tomatoes.
Tomato Express is on its way. Take your seats, we're getting started.
Recently, the varieties of Sofia breeding are gaining more and more interest. This season I've grown 3 such varieties, and now I'm going to tell you about them. Let's start with a story about a beautiful tomato called Sofia's Fiery Comet. This is a high-growing variety with thin stems and strong growth vigor. The height of the plants by the end of the summer exceeded 8 feet 2 inches or 2.5 meters. The tomatoes are exotic in color and look beautiful. Mostly red with lots of anthocyanin even in greenhouse conditions. Sometimes the fruits turned out heart-shaped, but most of them were still more elongated with noticeable long tips. I'm a fan of tomatoes of this shape, especially after my first experience with the Rebel Starfighter Prime tomato, so I liked the look of this variety as well. And also the tomatoes turned out to be a good size. Their weight started from almost 6 ounces or 162 grams and reached quite a decent 11 ounces or 318 grams. The flesh inside is light red in color and overall it's quite a juicy tomato. The taste of Sofia's Fiery Comet is unusual, mostly sweet, but a little acidity is also present. But this does not make the tomato worse. On the contrary, the flavor becomes more complex and multifaceted. I cannot say that in the first year the yield of the variety was at its best, but perhaps this is due to the hot and dry summer, which according to my observations, tomatoes of this type are not very fond of. In any case, it's an unusual variety and it was interesting to grow it. The same can be said about the next tomato, called Sofia's Sweet Caramel, which is also a beautiful variety, but the size of the fruit was a little smaller. The plants in my case turned out not too tall, and by the middle of the season their height was about 5 feet 7 inches or 1.7 meters. Tomatoes are yellow in color with pink wavy lines and anthocyanin. The tip is not as long as Sofia's Fiery Comet and in my opinion sharper. I also had a little confusion with determining the ripeness of the fruit. No, it's not that they didn't seem yellow enough to me, but that one of the plants gave a split of varietal characteristics and the tomatoes turned out green-fruited, but very pretty and decorated with red stripes. So I didn't immediately realize that they were fully ripe. I decided to taste the tomatoes from 2 plants at once, especially as it was interesting to compare their taste. The yellow-pink anthocyanin tomatoes, as far as I understand the correct version, weighed just over 3.5 ounces or 100 grams, while the green-red anthocyanin fruits weighed between 5 and 6.5 ounces or 148 and 186 grams. And with these results, I approached the long-awaited tasting. On the cut, the tomatoes are very beautiful. The first tomatoes have a bright yellow-red flesh, and the green-red tomato inside turned out to be tricolor with flecks of pink tones. The flavor of the yellow-pink tomato is very sweet, balanced, fruity with a little acidity, just the way I like it. Very bright, refreshing taste. In the second case, the acidity was not so pronounced. Rather, I felt a solid sweetness and an unusual spicy flavor. So their taste was still different. But the main thing is that I liked each of them and wanted to eat more. So just in case, in addition to Sofia's Sweet Caramel itself, I collected seeds from the green version too. Also, out of professional interest, I grew another mutation of Sofia's Sweet Caramel discovered by my friend last year, and the tomatoes also turned out to be of the similar shape, interesting light green color with pink stripes. The fruits on the 2 plants did not differ at all, and by the way, they were also delicious. Well, the next variety should be green-fruited, which is exactly what I got. And this tomato is called Emerald Brocade, variety with fruits of elongated shape, green color, and a large amount of anthocyanin on the sides facing the sunlight. Plants are very tall and by midsummer easily overcame the mark of 8 feet 2 inches or 2.5 meters when growing in 2 stems. Tomatoes are certainly beautiful, and their shape and color reminded me of one of my favorite green-fruited varieties, Rebel Starfighter VT16. When ripening, the color of the fruit only slightly changes, so this moment I often had to determine directly by touch. But I have had this kind of experience and it wasn't a big problem. The tomatoes weighed from 6.5 to 10 ounces, or 186 to 280 grams, and I believe this is quite a good size. The flesh is emerald colored, which explains the name, quite dense and at the same time juicy. The tomatoes are fragrant, with sweetness and a slight acidity. If you like tomato aesthetics and not lacking in good flavor, you'll probably like Emerald Brocade. Of course, I'm also obliged to note that all 3 of the above-mentioned varieties are not intended for long-term keeping. They should be eaten raw, for which they are actually created. And from the varieties by Sofia, let's move on to 2 exotic varieties of dwarf tomatoes. After all, among this direction of tomato breeding, they are also quite a lot. A year ago, I grew a Spot Viper dwarf tomato and I really liked it, especially for its rich flavor. This time, I decided to try growing a Funky Viper tomato. First of all, I was curious to see if it would be as tasty. At least it was immediately clear to me that Funky Viper is no less beautiful tomato, just as colorful and bright. The same can be said about the plants themselves, but unlike Spot Viper, which has potato-type foliage, Funky Viper has a regular, wrinkled leaf. In the middle of the season, the height of the plants did not exceed 3 feet 3 inches or 1 meter, and the tomatoes are rounded in shape and quite pretty. The coloring is dominated by metallic green shades, complemented by bright red touches. The variety steadfastly tolerated hot weather, set more and more new fruits, and although they were not too large, I harvested regularly and before the onset of the first frost. Their average weight was just over 2.5 ounces or 70 grams, and almost all of the fruits were nearly the same size. And of course it was time to find out whether Funky Viper would compete with its tasty relative. The tomatoes turned out to be kiwi-colored on the cut, and it also immediately caught my eye that they were quite juicy. But the main thing is that my hopes for a good flavor were fully satisfied. The flavor is rich and balanced. A strong tomato aroma comes from the fruit, and in the taste there is both sweetness and tartness. In general, it's a very vivid picture. And the taste of this very tomato flavor doesn't leave for quite a long time, even if you eat just one bite. So Funky Viper more than compensates for its maybe not the biggest size with a rich tomato flavor. And the next exotic dwarf is called Delta Diver Yellow, a tomato bred by Blaine Horton. As with the other varieties in the Delta Diver line, the potato-leaved plants are very tall by the standards of dwarf tomatoes, and by midsummer their height was 5 feet 3 inches or 1.6 meters. The tomatoes are round to flat round in shape, medium-sized, slightly ribbed, yellow-orange in color, with pink stripes. Usually their weight was around 3 ounces, or 80 and 100 grams, and during the season I picked a lot of such fruits. Well, I did not doubt that the flesh of tomatoes would be beautiful from the very beginning. It turned out to be a pink-orange color and quite fragrant. The taste is obviously dominated by sweetness, and acidity is certainly present, but it's not quite ordinary. That is, it's something more like a citrusy flavor. I definitely liked that aspect of it. And the tomatoes are juicy, but at the same time dense enough to stay on the vine for a while after ripening and not spoil, which is also convenient, especially when you don't have the opportunity to harvest often. Well, that was my story about 5 delicious and exotic tomato varieties, and I only have to add that there are many more to come.
Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, don't forget to subscribe and of course, love tomatoes, grow tomatoes. This is the Lucky Garden channel, and see you soon.
is losing all its meaning.